So good morning, I'm Klara Jordan, and I'm going to talk to you about a very different kind of security and cybersecurity than John did. I just wanted to have my slide so you can see the name of my organization, but let me just tell you a little bit of where I come from. I'm a recovering lawyer. I spent about first half of my career at NATO, and the second half of my career in Washington, D.C., doing public policy for FireEye and in think tank and for some large cybersecurity organizations. And then I was trying to find, what should I be doing with, the second half of my career? And I thought, well, is there a different way of thinking about cybersecurity? Is there a way to think about cybersecurity at scale? Is there a way to think about protecting the most vulnerable communities? So there's an organization called Global Cyber Alliance. I'll talk to you a little bit more about what we do in the second half of my presentation. But basically, we are a global not-for-profit. There is about 263 members that are our member organizations, and they range from large organizations like CrowdStrike, Microsoft, to small not-for-profit, small cybersecurity providers, academia, other not-for-profits. And really what we like to think of ourselves is that we are an internet laboratory, and what we do is try to think about what works at scale. Because we know what we can buy and what it can do for us. But there is still a scale, there is still an ecosystem that's left out unprotected. So our founders, as you can see, are the City of London Police, the Manhattan District Attorney, and the Center for Internet Security. And these three organizations, especially the first two on the law enforcement side, said, there has to be a different way to do cybersecurity. We can just go and prosecute. So they provided us with financial resources from that were seized in cybercrime, and said, well, go and think about what we can do for the whole ecosystem. So I'll run through what we do, but I'll just talk to you a little bit about the forgotten story of cyber hygiene. As I said, I come from the world of FireEye, I come from the world of APTs, I come from the world where, we really are trying to be at the kind of the high level of the scale of attackers. I just recently was in Poland in a CyberSec conference, and they were talking about securing the world digital DNA. And they were talking about IoT, they were talking about 5G, they were talking about all these cool things we're planning on doing in the future, but I thought, that's very forward-looking. In order to really explore and harness the benefits of the future, we have to really secure our DNA, and I do think that the DNA of the internet is not secure, that we do have huge fundamental problems that are still existing because the way how we networked our world. And I don't have to say to the room present here about where these problems come from, but they really come from how our founding fathers of the internet made the internet to work, that it's open, that there is relative anonymity, and that we are just very exposed because of how we wired our internet. So what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is cyber hygiene gets forgotten, and we do forget about the basics when we're talking about cybersecurity. And we forget about the basics because we do think that the basics no longer matters when we are facing an advanced persistent threat. John had a great, I really like his pie chart about different threats and different actors. But I think there's two issues if we only think about cybersecurity at that very high level, which is one, not everyone can afford the cybersecurity we're talking here about today. There is enormous innovation going on in all of your companies and all of your organizations, but not everyone can afford it. So we have a huge part of the ecosystem that is exposed. And the second thing is, even the APTs, even the nation-state attackers are opportunistic actors. They will go after the weakest link. They will go after your one small vulnerability, and they will not waste their zero-day exploit if you haven't patched your software. And so, we kind of, as I said, forget about the basics, and the reasons why we forget about the basics is because we don't really understand or think about or maybe even talk about the consequences of the basics. So I'll just spend a minute talking about some of the very mediatized or medialized, I'm not a native speaker, so you'll have to excuse if I mispronounce certain words. There are some of the medialized attacks that happened in the past, I would say 2 or 3 years, that if you really go down and dig down into where they started with bad cyber hygiene. So let's think about what's been happening around elections. I don't think anyone has missed what happened in 2016's US presidential elections, what's been happening in Germany, France, and some other countries. And if you look at where, what we see in the media is the end goal of the weaponization of information. But all of those attacks started with weak passwords, they started with spoofed emails, they started with, small little holes and gaps in the little ecosystem surrounding presidential elections. And so where we went from one spoofed email is to where we are today, when election cybersecurity is a huge issue, and it's a huge issue, in every single country. But again, what happened in 2016 in the United States really did start with bad cyber hygiene and bad and spoofed emails. I think ransomware is something everyone is very familiar with, and if we look at how most of the ransomware attacks start, they again do start with spoofed emails. They start with bad email practices, bad email security, and again, we rarely connect where ransomware comes from. We see what happened around NotPetya, we saw WannaCry, we saw the financial and human cost of these attacks, but we have not really said, oh, well, how did they really start somewhere? In the United States, I don't know if you're following, there are cities like Atlanta and Baltimore who've been really hit by massive ransomware attacks. And these are all organizations who have very poor practices. And unfortunately, they don't have resources, financial or human, to go out and procure what they should be able to procure. So John mentioned business email compromise. I just read a recent FBI report. Apparently, in the last 3 years, the global community had lost about $26 billion in business email compromise. Europol, Interpol, the UK's NCSC, ENISA, and other organizations are actually calling out business email compromise as the biggest threat to businesses worldwide. And I was actually very surprised to see that on your pie chart, it was a relatively small part for the moment, but I think that's just a trend that other parts of the world been seeing. And if you look at what business email compromise leads to, it does lead to ransomware, enables ransomware, and it enables wire transfer fraud. I think ransomware is a huge challenge. Business email compromise and spoofing is a huge challenge for public administrations. I think lots of cities, lots of government, lots of countries are trying to, they're trying to move to the e-governments. They're really trying to be out there, but this is really stopping them because their emails are being spoofed. And in the United States, again, an example, the tax returns season is a huge opportunity for criminals. And again, it leads really to how do you think about protecting your domain, protecting it against spoofing, and protecting it against these kind of basic cyber threats. So what do we do about it, or how the Global Cyber Alliance thinks about it? And as I mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about more what we do. Is that, we know that cyber hygiene standards exist, right? There's Center for Internet Security, there is NIST, there are some technical standards like DMARC. I don't know if you are all familiar with DMARC, but I'm going to talk about it a little later. So we know there are existing standards. We know there's existing guidelines. I think the challenge is, what do we do for those who are in our ecosystem, who cannot afford to pay for a managed security service? I just went through a couple of reports from large providers, large insurance companies, and they told me, the latest trends they're seeing is that organizations with sophisticated cybersecurity practices are being hit because their third and kind of fourth down the chain, someone in their supply chain, has not had a software patch. And these organizations said, we do protect ourselves internally, we try to protect our supply chain, but we don't know how to help, kind of really, really downstream supply chain. So there is lots of good efforts, out there in terms of guidance, in terms of existing practices. But we're still wondering, why we haven't gotten there. And where we come from is we haven't gotten there because we haven't figured out how cybersecurity works at scale. So maybe I will say that, from our perspective, where we come to these problems and what we are trying to create is actually a community of organizations who are active in cybersecurity, who are supporting and contributing to a larger goal to think about what can you do at scale. So we all know about phishing. I'm not going to really talk about why phishing is happening, what it leads to, and why it's successful. But one of the things that's been out there for at least a decade is DMARC, which is domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance. It's a very long name. But basically what it is, as I said, it's been around for, I think a decade. But the awareness and adoption is very low. And the awareness of adoption of it is very low because it does require certain, technical skills, but if set up properly, it stops direct domain spoofing in its tracks. So it really protects every domain owner in a way that nothing else out there currently protects it. So what we've done as an organization, and we're not for profit. We are doing a public good work. We're almost, it's a charity-like work, and I'm going to talk about what do we do for small businesses and election and journalists. So we looked at DMARC. We've done a big study about why there is a suboptimal adoption of DMARC, and then we went and set up actually a wizard and a video series and started a huge advocacy campaign globally around DMARC. And what this led to was, for example, we worked very closely with the Department of Homeland Security in the United States. And as a result of our engagement, they have issued a binding operational directive mandating DMARC, protection of the domain for all the federal agencies, because it's really the organizations who set up their own domains that are the most vulnerable. We work with the governments of New Zealand, we work with the government of Australia and some others, and so we really try to, and it exists in many different languages, including German, but what we really try to do is talk about benefits and talk about economic return on investment in DMARC and what it really does to prevent business email compromise. I'll say that use of anything we do and we provide is for free, and we're trying to really provide resources to the community so then they can go and kind of push out cyber hygiene at scale, because we do believe that cyber hygiene does come from the opportunity to work at scale. So we've also, as I mentioned, measured the economic impact on protecting your own domains, and the numbers are really astounding. The reports are on our website. We actually have a couple of organizations who are partnering with us who've provided pretty interesting information and metrics as to what protecting their own domain brought to them. So the other thing, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Quad 9, but it's another free resource out there for you. And basically, what it does, it's a protective DNS service. It protects your DNS. And we have pulled threat data from cybersecurity providers who are who are willing to, as I said, protect something on a larger scale than their own businesses. The threat data is valuable for commercial purposes at its beginning when it's really hot off the press for your clients, but in a couple of weeks, the data can still help the ecosystem, but it's not of a huge commercial value for you. So together with IBM and PCH, we built Quad9, and basically what it does, once you install it, it prevents you from accessing known malicious domains. So if we know there's something is bad, you will just not be able to go there. And this is really interesting for small municipalities. We work with the City of New York because the City of New York provides free Wi-Fi to their citizens and the tourists, and this just takes away the known badness out there. And again, there is the unknown badness, there are the 0 days, there are the sophisticated and stealthy attackers who will completely go around basic cyber hygiene. But I do think that raising the cost, doing the minimum, doing your cyber hygiene, and helping your small ecosystem around you to do that is very important. One of our latest projects, it's called the Automated IoT Defense Ecosystem, and we just launched it this year. And what we're doing is actually and John talked a little bit about the deception, but we're really putting a network of honeypots and proxypots around globally, working with universities, different providers, different hosting organizations. And we're trying to see the attacks on IoT devices in real life. And what it does is it feeds into a dashboard where organization can actually go take data, use data, analyze data, they can exchange data, they can take it out, they can provide it for free. And what it really does is the dashboard is down the road going to allow automated IoT defense. So we've done also, I'll just very briefly mention our small business election and journalist toolkits. So we've done three toolkits for 3 very vulnerable communities. And again, we looked at the existing guidance. There is so much guidance for small businesses, but they have no resources to implement it. So we literally build a toolkit where we took the best or the most effective cybersecurity controls and matched them with free tools and put guidance there. So again, the organization like MasterCard and other large banks who are our partners can push it out to their client base and say, well, this is not going to help against everything, but it's going to eliminate the most pervasive threats. So we're mapping to government standards globally in terms of controls that we're implementing, and again, it's to protect the basic things. So we've done one for election officials, one for journalists, and one for small businesses. I will just run through, you can really go on our website and go through it. It's also done in a language that's easy to understand. And this is not necessarily for your organizations. This is for organizations, in your ecosystem or down the chain, or for your mom and pop shops if you are working with them and you want to give them something or point them to something that can help them protect themselves. So I'll just say that, there is different ways to think about cybersecurity. We think about cybersecurity in terms of bringing the communities together, doing something impactful at scale, and then pushing it out globally. So we have, as I said, almost 300 organizations in 30 countries, and they come to us for different things. Some just want to engage, some want to be part of our advocacy efforts, some want to provide, we have lots of organizations who do provide actually free tools because they want to help the world and they want to push out, some of what they are doing. But we're really interested in bringing more organizations, whether to help with our toolkits or working on the IoT. So I'll be around all day, and you'll hear actually from me on 2 other panels. So I'm looking forward to meeting you and answering any questions you may have about GCA. Thank you.
Great, thank you.